The dawn light breaks over the Lorraine Plateau, September 1944. Through the morning mist, a German Panther commander raises his binoculars and counts them. 1, 5, 12. 20 American Shermans rolling toward his position in loose formation, their 75 MIPI guns tracking left and right across the open farmland. He lowers the glasses and allows himself a thin smile. The reports from Berlin weren't exaggerating. The Americans are sending their tin cans against the pride of German engineering. His Panther's frontal armor measures 80 millimeters thick, sloped at optimal angles. The Sherman's shells will bounce off like raindrops. His 75 millimeter long-barreled gun can punch through American armor at ranges where they can't even scratch his paint. It's almost unfair. The radio crackles. 3 more Panthers confirm position along the tree line. They have the high ground, clear fields of fire, and superiority in every technical specification that matters. The German tank commanders have studied the intelligence briefs. They know the Sherman's weaknesses by heart. Thin armor, underpowered gun, high profile, gasoline engine that burns when hit. The Americans call them Ronsons, lights, every time. The Panther commander watches the Shermans advance. They're not even spreading out properly. American tank doctrine, he thinks. No finesse, just mass production and numerical advantage. Typical. He keys his radio. "Wait for my mark. Let them close to 1,500 meters. We'll turn this field into a graveyard." The German crews wait. Experienced, patient, confident in their technological superiority. The Panthers were rushed into production after the disaster at Kursk, Germany's answer to the Soviet T-34, and a response to reports of American tank development. Every metric favors the German design. Weight, 45 tons versus 30. Armor penetration, 138 meters at 1,000 meters versus barely 60 millimeters. Speed, firepower, protection, the Panther wins every comparison. But there's something the intelligence briefs don't capture, something the German engineers never calculated when they mocked America's cheap, mass-produced tank design, something that 20 Sherman commanders understand as they roll toward the German position with radios crackling, engines purring in perfect synchronization, and ammunition racks full to capacity. The Germans built the better tank. The Americans built the better weapon. Before we continue this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from. Which city, which state? I'm curious to know who's brave enough to discover what happened when American ingenuity met German engineering on the fields of France. The story begins 9 months earlier in the sprawling factories of Detroit, where the sound of American production drowns out any doubt about inferior specifications. The Fisher tank arsenal runs 24 hours, 3 shifts, 7 days a week. The assembly line stretches for a quarter mile, and every 60 minutes another M4 Sherman rolls off into the proving grounds, its engine already broken in, its systems tested, its crew training packet tucked into the commander's hatch. The foreman checks his clipboard. Unit number 34719. Still 13,000 short of the 50,000 unit contract. Across the factory floor, a design engineer named Robert watches the latest batch roll through final inspection. He's heard the reports from Europe, heard about the German Tigers and Panthers, heard the tank crew's complaints filtered back through command channels. The Sherman needs a bigger gun, thicker armor, more speed. Every week, someone writes another memo demanding they halt production and redesign. Robert runs the numbers every time. A redesign means 6 months of retooling, 6 months of reduced production, 6 months where the men fighting in France and Germany go without replacement tanks. The current Sherman isn't perfect, but it's available, it's reliable, and most importantly, it's there. He walks the line, checking welds, inspecting track assemblies, verifying electrical systems. The Sherman uses a radial aircraft engine, reliable, available, easy to maintain. The transmission is simple. The suspension is proven. Every component was chosen not for maximum performance, but for maximum availability. Ford can make these engines. Chrysler can make these transmissions. Fisher can make these hulls. Pressed steel can make these turrets. The Germans built a masterpiece. The Americans built a system. In the proving grounds outside, a test crew runs a new Sherman through paces. They drive it through mud, through water obstacles, up steep grades. They fire the main gun 50 times without pause. They simulate battle damage and practice field repairs. The crew chief times everything with a stopwatch. Engine replacement, 4 hours with a crane, 8 hours with block and tackle. Track repair, 40 minutes for a full section replacement. Transmission service, accessible through hull floor, 6 hours for complete teardown. Every system designed for field maintenance. Every component built for replacement under combat conditions. The chief fills out his report. Vehicle performed within specifications. Recommend approval for overseas deployment. Meanwhile, in a converted warehouse in New Jersey, another kind of production runs around the clock. Spare parts, mountains of them, crated engines, pallets of track links, boxes of gun tubes, thousands of transmissions, tens of thousands of road wheels, hundreds of thousands of individual components, all cataloged, all ready for immediate shipment. An Army logistics officer stands in the warehouse and does the math. For every Sherman fighting in Europe, 3 more are in the pipeline. For every tank at the front, 2 are on ships crossing the Atlantic. For every crew engaging the enemy, another crew is training stateside. The supply chain doesn't just deliver tanks. It delivers a complete system of replacement, repair, and reinforcement. He thinks about the German production reports captured by intelligence. The Panthers are magnificent machines, but Germany's building them one at a time in factories that get bombed every week. Their supply chains run through occupied territory. Their spare parts come from a dozen different subcontractors. Their crews train on vehicles that are rushed to the front before the paint dries. The Americans aren't trying to build the best tank. They're building the best tank force. At Fort Knox, Kentucky, the training grounds echo with the sound of 75-millimeter guns. New crews run through their drills, driver training on the obstacle course, gunner practice on the ranges, commander exercises in the tactical simulator, radio operator certification on the communications net, loader drills with dummy ammunition. The training schedule runs 16 weeks, longer than German crews get, more comprehensive than Soviet training. Every man learns his job and 2 backup positions. Every crew learns to work as a unit. Every unit learns to coordinate with infantry, artillery, and air support. Sergeant Miller watches his crew load their 4th practice magazine of the morning. They're getting faster. Load time down to 4 seconds. The German crews might have the better gun, but his boys can put 3 rounds down range in the time it takes a Panther to fire twice. He climbs into the commander's hatch and keys the radio. All units, prepare for movement. We're running the coordinated assault drill. 5 Shermans roll forward in formation. Not a line, not a column. A flexible deployment that can adapt to enemy fire, terrain, or opportunity. They practice the maneuver they'll use in combat. Advance, contact, deploy. 1 tank suppresses while 4 maneuver. Shoot and move. Never stay still. Never present a stationary target. Miller watches through his periscope. The crew operates like machinery. Driver anticipates terrain. Gunner tracks targets smoothly. Loader maintains rhythm. Radio operator relays commands. They're not trying to win a duel. They're trying to win a battle. That's the difference the German engineers never calculated. Across the Atlantic, the first engagement reports filter back through division headquarters. 3rd Armored Division encountered Panthers near Normandy. Result: 12 Shermans lost, 3 Panthers destroyed. The casualty ratio looks bad on paper, but the division is already receiving replacement tanks. The German Panther Company is still waiting for spare parts. A month later, another report. 4th Armored Division engaged Panther Battalion in Lorraine. Result: 18 Shermans lost, 8 Panthers destroyed. But the American division is back at full strength within a week. The German battalion is combat ineffective, waiting for replacement vehicles that are stuck in a factory in Bavaria. The pattern emerges in the intelligence summaries. The Germans win the duels. The Americans win the WWII campaign. In a briefing room at Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, an armor officer presents the latest analysis. Charts show Sherman losses. Graphs demonstrate the Panther's superior specifications, but the final slide tells the real story. American tank divisions maintain 90% operational readiness. German panzer divisions average 40%. Eisenhower studies the numbers. What's the recommendation? Keep building Shermans, sir. Build more of them. The specifications don't matter if we can field 10 tanks for every one of theirs. The officer doesn't say the quiet part, doesn't mention that American tanks keep fighting because American logistics keep flowing, doesn't point out that crew survivability matters more than armor thickness when you can train replacement crews faster than the enemy can build replacement tanks, doesn't emphasize that mechanical reliability wins wars even when it doesn't win headlines. The Americans aren't building tanks to impress engineers. They're building tanks to win a war. And in the factories of Detroit, another Sherman rolls off the line every 60 minutes, ready to prove that mass production is its own kind of genius. The first myths about Sherman inferiority were born in the hedgerows of Normandy, where close-range ambushes turned battlefield geometry against American armor. Lieutenant Morrison brings his Sherman platoon to a halt at the edge of a sunken road. The hedgerows tower on both sides, ancient earthen walls topped with vegetation so thick you can't see 3 feet into them. The roads run like trenches through the Norman countryside, and every intersection is a potential killing ground. His radio crackles. "Lead element, this is Baker Company. We've got infantry pinned down 200 yards ahead. Possible armor contact." Morrison studies the map. 2 ways forward. Continue down this road or detour through an open field. The field puts them in plain sight. The road offers cover but limits maneuverability. He chooses the road, and that decision joins thousands of others that will shape the Sherman's reputation for the next 80 years. They advance slowly. The Sherman's engine purrs reliably. No mechanical problems, no transmission failures. The tank is performing exactly as designed, but the design wasn't optimized for hedgerow fighting, where visibility measures in yards and ambush range is point blank. The Panther waits behind the next hedgerow intersection. It's been in position for 3 hours, engine cold, commander watching the road through a gap in the vegetation. When the Sherman rounds the corner, the range is 40 meters. At that distance, armor thickness doesn't matter. The Panther's 75 mm gun punches through the Sherman's frontal plate like it's cardboard. Morrison's crew has 4 seconds to react. The driver reverses. The gunner traverses. But the Sherman is backing blind into a narrow road, and before they can return fire, the second shot penetrates the hull. The tank starts burning. The crew bails out. All 5 men make it. They're trained for this. Sherman crews practice emergency egress until it's muscle memory. The tank is lost, but the men survive. 3 days later, Morrison is back in combat with a replacement Sherman. The tank he lost is already tagged for salvage. A recovery crew will tow it to a maintenance depot. If it's repairable, it'll be back in action in a week. If not, the serviceable components will be stripped and installed in other tanks. Nothing is wasted, but the story that spreads isn't about crew survivability or replacement speed. It's about the Panther killing the Sherman in 2 shots. That story reaches the next platoon and the next, and soon every American tanker knows the Sherman can't match the Panther in a straight fight. What they're learning is battlefield geometry, not tank inferiority. The hedgerows eliminate the Sherman's key advantages: mobility, numbers, and combined arms coordination. In this terrain, every engagement becomes an isolated duel at close range, and in duels, the Panther's specifications matter. The German tank commanders know it. They use the terrain deliberately, positioning Panthers at intersection points, letting the Bocage channel American tanks into kill zones. It's the perfect environment for a low-velocity, high-armor penetration gun. The perfect scenario for a heavily armored vehicle that doesn't need to move much. Back at division headquarters, the intelligence officer collects the battle reports. Sherman losses are running 3-1 against Panthers in the hedgerows. The casualty numbers look damning, but he's watching different metrics. American tank divisions are maintaining operational strength. German panzer divisions are shrinking. Every lost Sherman is replaced within days. Every lost Panther takes weeks or months to replace. The Germans are winning individual engagements but losing the strategic balance. He files his report. Current loss ratios are sustainable given replacement rates and production capacity. Recommend continued operational deployment with tactical adjustments. Those tactical adjustments start filtering down through the command structure. New protocols for hedgerow fighting, infantry and tank cooperation, artillery coordination, engineer support to blast through hedgerows instead of following roads. The doctrine adapts faster than the design could be changed. In a maintenance depot behind the lines, a crew works on damaged Shermans. They're not building new tanks. They're rebuilding old ones. A tank that took a penetrating hit 3 days ago is getting a new turret. Another that threw a track on a mine is getting replacement bogies. A third that suffered engine damage is being fitted with a fresh power plant. The depot chief tracks repair times. Average turnaround: 4 days from battle damage to full operational status. That's the number that matters. Not how tough the armor is, but how fast a damaged tank returns to combat. A German intelligence officer would look at these numbers and see waste. All these damaged tanks, all these repairs, proof that the Sherman is inferior. An American logistics officer looks at the same numbers and sees a system working. Damaged tanks are assets in the pipeline. Repair is faster than replacement. The depot is a battlefield multiplier. The German officer is counting destroyed tanks. The American officer is counting combat-ready vehicles. Meanwhile, the myth spreads. Soldiers write letters home. Journalists file stories. The narrative takes hold. The Sherman is outmatched by German armor. It becomes conventional wisdom. Even General Patton complains about it, demanding better tanks, heavier guns, thicker armor. What nobody mentions in the letters and stories: Patton's Third Army maintains offensive momentum despite the inferior tanks. His divisions advance faster and farther than any Allied formation. The Shermans keep running, keep fighting, keep pushing forward. The British try a different approach. They mount bigger guns on Sherman hulls, creating the Sherman Firefly. It can match the Panther's penetration. But the modification takes time and production capacity. Every Firefly is one fewer standard Sherman. The British calculate they can field 1 Firefly for every 4 standard Shermans. The Americans calculate differently. They can field 10 standard Shermans for every specialized variant. The math says keep building the standard model. Keep the supply chain simple. Keep the training consistent. Keep the replacement pipeline flowing. In a captured German document, a Panzer commander writes his assessment. The American tanks are individually inferior, but systemically superior. We destroy them, and more appear. We damage them, and they return. We kill the crews, and new crews arrive. Fighting American armor is like fighting the sea. Every wave can be defeated, but the tide cannot be stopped. That document sits in an intelligence file, classified. The public narrative remains. Sherman inferior, German tanks superior. It's easier to understand, makes better headlines, fits the traditional military story of technological competition and battlefield heroism. The truth is more complex and less dramatic. The Sherman isn't losing to the Panther. The Sherman is winning, despite the Panther, not through superior specifications, but through superior logistics, superior training, superior production, and superior doctrine. The German engineers mocked the American approach. They saw the Sherman's modest specifications and laughed. They're still laughing when their Panthers break down waiting for spare parts. They're still laughing when American divisions advance with 90% readiness while German divisions collapse at 40%. They're still laughing when the tide reaches them. The turning point doesn't come from a design change or a specification upgrade, but from the simple physics of logistics meeting, the mathematics of attrition. September 1944. The Seine. River crossings are secured. The bocage is behind them. Third Army is racing across France toward the German border, and the terrain has changed everything. Open country, clear fields of fire, room to maneuver. This is where American doctrine was designed to work. Captain James Fletcher commands a company of Shermans in 4th Armored Division. His morning briefing includes the latest intelligence. German Panther Battalion detected 10 miles ahead, defensive positions in the Lorraine Highlands. Estimated strength, 35 Panthers, fully operational. Fletcher counts his own force, 60 Shermans. The math seems simple enough. 35 Panthers with superior specifications versus 60 Shermans with superior numbers. But Fletcher knows the math that matters isn't on the spec sheets. It's in the supply situation. His Shermans are fully fueled. Ammunition racks are full, 71 rounds per tank. Maintenance crews performed overnight services on every vehicle. Replacement tanks are positioned 12 miles back. The supply convoy that crossed the Seine yesterday carried enough parts to rebuild half his battalion if needed. The intelligence report on the German battalion shows a different picture. The Panthers are in position but haven't moved in 3 days. Why? Fuel shortage. The German supply line runs 300 miles through territory under constant air attack. Every gallon of fuel that reaches the front represents 5 gallons lost to American fighter bombers. Fletcher briefs his platoon leaders. Here's how this works. They have the defensive position and the better gun. We have mobility and numbers. We're not going to duel them. We're going to drown them. The plan forms quickly. It's not complex. Doesn't need to be. One platoon suppresses the German position with smoke and high-explosive rounds, not trying to penetrate armor, just keeping German heads down. While they're suppressed, 3 platoons maneuver to flank positions. The Panthers can't engage threats from multiple angles simultaneously. They'll have to choose targets, and while they're choosing, American tanks are closing range and hammering them from sides where armor is thinner. It's not elegant. It's not the kind of tactical brilliance that wins medals. It's arithmetic applied to battlefield geometry. The Germans have to win every engagement. The Americans just have to win enough of them. At 0600 hours, the attack begins. 12 Shermans advance directly toward the German position, spreading across a 2-mile front. Long-range fire from the Panthers starts immediately. The first Sherman takes a hit at 1900 meters. The crew bails out. Recovery vehicle is already moving forward to retrieve the disabled tank. The Shermans keep advancing. Their return fire isn't penetrating Panther armor at this range, but that's not the point. They're shooting high explosive rounds at the tree lines where Panthers are positioned. They're creating smoke. They're forcing the Germans to button up and fight through vision ports instead of open hatches. While the German commanders focus on the frontal assault, the flanking platoons reach their positions. The terrain helps. Rolling hills and scattered woodlands that allow covered approach. The Shermans move fast, exploiting their mobility advantage. The Panthers could reposition, but that requires starting engines moving from prepared positions, consuming precious fuel reserves. The German battalion commander faces the classic defensive dilemma: maintain position and accept attack from multiple directions, or reposition and lose terrain advantage. He chooses to maintain position. It's the wrong choice, but the right choice wasn't available. Fletcher's flanking platoons open fire at 600 meters. At that range, the Sherman's 75mm gun can penetrate Panther side armor. The American gunners aim for the hull between track and turret. 3 Panthers take disabling hits in the first minute. The German crews bail out and sprint for cover. The Panther battalion tries to respond. Turrets traverse toward the new threat. But now they're taking fire from 3 directions simultaneously: front, left flank, right flank. The suppressing platoon increases fire rate. Smoke blankets the German position. Individual German commanders lose situational awareness. Fletcher watches from his command position. The radio chatter is intense but organized. Platoon leaders calling targets. Gunners confirming hits. Drivers maneuvering for better angles. It sounds like chaos, but it's coordinated chaos, and that coordination is force multiplier that doesn't appear on specification sheets. The engagement lasts 40 minutes. Fletcher loses 8 tanks, 3 destroyed beyond repair, 5 damaged but recoverable. Of the destroyed tanks, all 15 crewmen survive. They're already being pulled back for reassignment to replacement tanks. The German Panther battalion loses 21 tanks, 14 destroyed, 7 immobilized with damage. Of the destroyed tanks, 32 crewmen are killed because Panther egress is more difficult and escape time is longer. The immobilized tanks will be abandoned when the battalion withdraws because there are no recovery vehicles close enough to retrieve them. More importantly, the German battalion is combat ineffective. With 14 tanks remaining and no prospect of immediate replacement, they're withdrawn from frontline duty. Those 14 Panthers will sit in reserve for 3 weeks waiting for enough replacement vehicles to reform the battalion. Fletcher's company is back at full strength in 4 days. 6 replacement tanks arrive from the supply depot. The 5 damaged tanks are repaired and returned to service. New crews integrate with veterans. The company returns to offensive operations at 90% combat effectiveness. This pattern repeats across the entire front. American tank units lose more vehicles in individual engagements, but maintain higher operational readiness across the campaign. German Panzer units win tactical victories, but suffer strategic depletion. A captured German officer explains it during interrogation. "Your tanks are inferior, but you have so many of them, and they always work. Ours are superior, but we never have enough, and they're always broken." The interrogator files the report, another data point confirming what the logistics officers already know. Tank versus tank comparison misses the point. The relevant comparison is system versus system, and in that comparison, American mechanized warfare is crushing German armored doctrine through simple availability. In Berlin, German tank designers study the combat reports and make recommendations for Panther improvements: more armor, bigger gun, better optics. Every recommendation makes the Panther more formidable in individual combat and less producible in mass quantity. In Detroit, American designers study the same reports and make different recommendations. Simplify parts inventory, improve field repair procedures, increase production efficiency. Every recommendation makes the Sherman more available in theater and more maintainable in combat. The Germans are designing for battle. The Americans are designing for war. By October 1944, the strategic disparity becomes undeniable. American armored divisions operate with tank strengths at 80 to 90% of authorized levels. German panzer divisions operate at 40 to 50%. The mathematical consequence is straightforward. Every German advantage in individual tank quality is neutralized by American advantage in collective availability. Fletcher doesn't think in these terms. He just knows that when he loses a tank, he gets a replacement. When a Panther goes down, it stays down. That's the only math that matters at his level. And that math is relentlessly, inevitably, in America's favor. The German technical superiority that looked overwhelming on paper begins dissolving under the corrosive pressure of mechanical reality and strategic overreach. November 1944. The Lorraine mud season arrives, and with it comes the true test of engineering philosophy. Rain falls for 3 days straight, turning the French countryside into a morass that will separate reliable machines from temperamental ones. Sergeant William Kowalski guides his Sherman through the muck without incident. The tank's ground pressure, 13 pounds per square inch, keeps it mobile even in conditions that would bog down heavier vehicles. The suspension articulates smoothly over uneven terrain. The engine maintains steady power output. The transmission shifts without complaint. 6 miles ahead, a German Panther battalion struggles with the same mud. The Panthers weigh 15 tons more than Shermans, creating ground pressure of 14 pounds per square inch. It doesn't sound like much difference, but in saturated soil, that extra 1.5 tons per square foot is the difference between mobile and immobile. 3 Panthers sink to their hull in the first hour. Recovery efforts begin immediately, but the Panther's design creates problems. The overlapping road wheels that give it smooth ride quality trap mud between layers. As the mud freezes overnight, the wheels lock solid. Crews spend morning hours with blowtorches trying to thaw the packed earth just to get the suspension moving. The Panther's transmission represents German engineering at its finest. 8 forward gears, smooth shifting, optimized for speed and power. It's also a mechanical nightmare in field conditions. When one breaks, the entire final drive assembly must be removed for repair. The job requires specialized tools, trained mechanics, and 12 hours of labor in a maintenance depot. When a Sherman throws a transmission, the crew can drop it through the floor plate in 8 hours, using basic hand tools and a block and tackle. If they don't have time for proper repair, they can limp back to maintenance at reduced speed. The Sherman's transmission isn't elegant. It's 3 forward gears and simple dog clutch design, but it's accessible, repairable, and replaceable. Kowalski doesn't think about engineering philosophy. He thinks about the fact that his tank started on the first crank this morning, same as every morning. The Panther crews 3 miles away are still trying to coax their engines to life after the overnight freeze. The Panther's Maybach HL230 engine represents advanced design, liquid-cooled V12, 700 horsepower, sophisticated fuel injection. It's also temperamental in cold weather. The fuel injectors freeze. The cooling system develops leaks. The sophisticated electronics fail in mud and moisture. When it works, it's magnificent. When it doesn't, the tank is dead weight. The Sherman's right radial engine is primitive by comparison. Air-cooled, simple carburetor, basic ignition. but it's derived from aircraft engines proven over hundreds of thousands of flight hours. It starts in any weather. It runs on multiple fuel grades. It requires minimal maintenance. And when it fails, any American mechanic who's worked on a truck engine can fix it. By noon, the Panther Battalion has 6 tanks immobilized by mechanical issues. 3 with transmission problems, 2 with frozen road wheels, 1 with engine failure. The battalion commander faces a decision that will define German armored operations for the rest of the war. Continue the mission with reduced strength or halt and wait for repairs. He chooses to continue. The immobilized tanks are left behind with minimal security because he needs every available crew for the mobile vehicles. It's a decision born of desperation. German armor doctrine requires concentration of force, but mechanical reality forces dispersion of assets. Kowalski's company encounters the abandoned Panthers that evening. They're empty. Crews evacuated. No demolition charges. Placed. The Germans need these tanks too badly to destroy them. An American recovery team tags them for salvage. By tomorrow, they'll be intelligence prizes. Next week, they might be running again under American crews for evaluation purposes. This scene repeats across the entire Western Front. German armor operations are constrained not by enemy action, but by mechanical reliability. American commanders learn to factor German mechanical attrition into operational planning. Attack a Panther battalion, and 20% will be non-operational due to mechanical issues before the battle even starts. The German response is to build more complicated systems with tighter tolerances and more sophisticated engineering. Every improvement makes the Panther more capable when it works and less reliable in field conditions. The design philosophy assumes access to depot-level maintenance, trained specialists, and abundant spare parts. None of those assumptions hold true in late 1944. American design philosophy assumes the opposite. Every Sherman system is designed for field maintenance by minimally trained mechanics with basic tools. The parts are interchangeable, the procedures are simple. The tolerances are loose enough to work even when conditions are terrible. A maintenance officer compares the two approaches in a report to Ordnance Department. The German Panther is engineered to peacetime standards in a wartime environment. The American Sherman is engineered to wartime standards and exceeds peacetime expectations. The report includes statistics. Average German Panther operational readiness, 43%. Average American Sherman operational readiness, 87%. Those numbers tell the story of two engineering philosophies meeting reality. In a captured German maintenance depot, American inspectors examine the spare parts inventory. It's chaotic. Parts from 3 different Panther variants. Road wheels from earlier models that don't fit later hulls. Transmission components that require matching serial numbers. Every repair requires searching through manifests to find compatible parts. The American supply system is standardized. A Sherman transmission from a tank built in January 1943 fits perfectly in a tank built in October 1944. A road wheel from the Fisher Arsenal is identical to a road wheel from pressed steel. Parts are interchangeable not just between batches, but between years of production. This standardization looks like lack of innovation. German engineers point to it as proof of American mechanical inferiority, but it's deliberate design philosophy. Every choice that makes the Sherman less impressive on paper makes it more maintainable in practice. Kowalski will never see the engineering reports or maintenance statistics. He just knows his tank runs every day. He knows when it breaks, his crew can fix it. He knows the supply convoy brings parts that actually fit. He knows his battalion maintains higher tank availability than the German units across the line. That knowledge is worth more than an extra 20 millimeters of armor or another 100 meters of gun range. By December, the strategic impact of mechanical reliability becomes impossible to ignore. German Panzer divisions exist on paper but can't field combat-ready battalions. American armored divisions maintain offensive pressure because their tanks keep running. The German miracle weapons look impressive in photographs and propaganda films. The American workhorses look pedestrian in comparison, but the workhorses are winning the war, one mud-caked mile at a time, because they start every morning and run until the mission is complete. That's the engineering triumph the German designers never acknowledged. Not the triumph of technical sophistication, but the triumph of practical reliability. Not the achievement of maximum performance, but the achievement of consistent availability. The Sherman doesn't need to be better than the Panther in a duel. It just needs to be there, ready to fight every single day. And it is. American tactical doctrine evolves to transform the Sherman's supposed weaknesses into systemic advantages through coordination that German armor doctrine cannot match. December 1944. Captain Thomas Fletcher briefs his Sherman company on the afternoon mission. The intelligence map shows German defensive positions anchored by a Panther platoon, 4 tanks, hull down, controlling a crossroads. Standard German defensive doctrine: strong position, interlocking fields of fire, professionally executed. Fletcher's briefing doesn't focus on tank versus tank engagement. Instead, he coordinates with multiple elements: infantry company for close support, artillery battery for indirect fire, tank destroyer platoon with high-velocity guns, air liaison officer with fighter bombers on call, combat engineers with demolition charges. This is combined arms warfare, the doctrine that makes American mechanized forces effective beyond what any single weapons system could achieve alone. The Sherman isn't designed to fight Panthers in isolation. It's designed to be part of a coordinated system where every element supports the others. The operation begins with artillery, not direct fire at the Panthers. Their frontal armor can shrug off anything except a direct hit from a large caliber gun. Instead, the artillery hammers the infantry positions around the tanks. High explosive rounds crater the tree lines. Smoke obscures observation. The German infantry that's supposed to protect the Panthers from close assault gets pinned or driven back. While artillery works over the supporting positions, the tank destroyer platoon moves into firing positions on the flank. The M10 destroyers carry high-velocity 76 square-millimeter guns designed specifically for armor penetration. They're not as versatile as the Sherman, but they don't need to be. They have one job: kill enemy armor at long range. The Panthers detect the destroyers and start engaging. It's what Fletcher wants. While the German commanders focus on the tank destroyer threat, his Shermans advance, using terrain for cover. They're not charging directly at the German position. They're working through defilade, using every fold in the ground, every hedgerow, every building to mask their approach. The infantry moves with the tanks, not behind them. That's suicide in mechanized warfare. The infantry advances alongside, using the Shermans for mobile cover, but operating as independent units. When they encounter German infantry, they suppress and clear them. When they reach close range, they mark targets for the tank guns with tracer fire. The combined arms coordination that looks simple in briefings requires extensive training. The infantry has to trust the tanks to support them. The tankers have to trust the infantry to protect them from close assault. The artillery has to maintain fire discipline to avoid hitting friendly forces. The air support has to identify targets despite smoke and chaos. Fletcher watches the operation unfold from his command tank. The German Panthers are formidable, but they're isolated. Their supporting infantry is suppressed. Their observation is degraded by smoke. Their fields of fire are complicated by American forces approaching from multiple directions. One Panther tries to reposition. It's a mistake. Movement reveals the tank to the destroyer platoon. Two high-velocity 76 mm rounds hit in quick succession. The Panther catches fire, the crew bails out and is immediately captured by American infantry. The remaining Panthers maintain position, but their situation is deteriorating. American tanks are closing from three directions. Infantry is working through the defensive positions. Artillery continues to isolate the German armor from support. The Panthers can kill individual Shermans, but they can't stop the coordinated advance. Fletcher's company loses 3 tanks in the engagement, 1 penetrating hit, 2 mobility kills from hitting mines. All 9 crewmen survive and are already being pulled back. The tanks will be recovered after the position is secured. The German Panther platoon loses all 4 tanks, 2 destroyed by tank destroyer fire, 1 immobilized and captured when infantry reaches the position, 1 abandoned when the crew realizes they're cut off and facing capture. The action report emphasizes combined arms effectiveness. The Shermans performed their role as mobile fire support and assault vehicles. They didn't need to win duels with Panthers because the coordinated system eliminated the conditions where duels occur. This doctrine is replicated across every American armored division. The Sherman is one component in a system that includes artillery, infantry, air support, engineers, and specialized armor killers. German doctrine concentrates capability in the tank itself, assuming the Panzer can dominate the battlefield through superior specifications. The American approach distributes capability across multiple systems. The Sherman provides mobility, reliability, and fire support. Specialized vehicles provide anti-armor capability. Infantry provides close combat power. Artillery provides suppression and breakthrough power. Air support provides reconnaissance and interdiction. No single element is dominant. The system is dominant. A German Panzer officer writes in his diary, "The Americans fight like factory workers. Everything is organized, everything is coordinated. There's no artistry, no tactical brilliance, just methodical application of resources until resistance collapses. It's impossible to counter." That diary entry captures the fundamental difference in doctrine. German armor warfare emphasizes tactical excellence, the brilliant maneuver, the advantageous position, the decisive engagement. It's warfare as art. American doctrine emphasizes systematic application, reliable coordination, redundant capability, overwhelming material superiority. It's warfare as logistics. The Germans are playing chess. The Americans are solving equations. By January 1945, the doctrinal superiority of combined arms warfare is undeniable. German armor units that win individual engagements still lose territory because they can't sustain operations against coordinated American attacks. The Panthers kill Shermans, but the Shermans keep coming with infantry, artillery, and air support that the Panthers can't counter alone. Fletcher doesn't analyze the strategic implications. He executes missions. But after each operation, his company returns to full strength, faster than the German units they're fighting. His supply lines remain open. His support elements remain available. His doctrine remains effective. The Sherman is the visible symbol of American armor, but it's not the source of American success. The source is the system, the training that produces coordinated operations, the logistics that maintain sustained combat power, the doctrine that distributes capability across multiple complementary systems. German technical superiority in tank design becomes irrelevant when the tank is fighting alone against combined arms teams. The Panther can dominate the Sherman in a duel, but modern mechanized warfare isn't dueling. It's systematic destruction of enemy capability through coordinated application of overwhelming force. The Germans built better tanks. The Americans built better warfare. And in the final analysis, warfare is what wins wars. The numerical avalanche that American production unleashes transforms local tactical advantage into theater-wide strategic impossibility for German armor forces. January 1945. The snow covers the Ardennes forest, and through the white landscape rolls the visible manifestation of American industrial might. Not dozens of tanks, not hundreds, thousands. The roads from Belgium to Germany carry a continuous stream of Shermans, jeeps, half-tracks, supply trucks, tank destroyers, and self-propelled artillery. The German offensive that began in December has stalled, and now the counterattack begins. Major Heinrich Bauer commands what remains of a German Panther company. He started the Ardennes offensive with 14 tanks. He has 6 operational now. 3 were destroyed in combat, 2 broke down and couldn't be recovered. 3 more are immobilized with mechanical issues, waiting for parts that will never arrive. Through his binoculars, Bauer counts American tanks assembling for attack. He stops counting at 50. There are more behind them, and more behind those, and replacements positioned in reserve, and additional units in the supply columns that stretch back 20 miles. It's not a military force, it's an industrial process applied to warfare. His radio crackles. Another Panther company reports similar numbers. Division headquarters confirms the intelligence. American First Army is committing 3 full armored divisions to the counteroffensive. Each division operates at 90% strength. Combined, they're fielding over 700 tanks. The entire German panzer force in the sector can muster 200 tanks across all types. Half are operational on any given day. The mathematics are simple and brutal. Bauer pulls back his company to prepared positions. There's no point in advancing, no possibility of counterattack. The only option is defensive delay, trading ground for time, hoping that American logistics will eventually outrun their supply lines. But American logistics don't fail. The supply convoys that Bauer sees in the distance represent the triumph of the Red Ball Express. The truck companies, the Liberty ship convoys, the entire logistical network that stretches from Detroit to the front lines. Every tank has fuel, every gun has ammunition, every damaged vehicle has spare parts. The contrast with German logistics is absolute. Bauer's company is rationed to 30 kilometers of movement per day to conserve fuel. His ammunition is limited because the supply trains are under constant air attack. His spare parts come from cannibalizing damaged vehicles because the factory production can't keep up with field losses. When the American attack begins, it's not a battle, it's a flood. The Shermans advance on a broad front, not in neat formations, but in loose clusters that can adapt to resistance. They don't charge into German positions. They probe, identify strong points, suppress them with artillery, then bypass or overwhelm them with numerical superiority. Bauer's Panthers engage at maximum range. The 75mm guns reach out to 2,000 meters. 3 Shermans take hits in the first minute. The German crews reload smoothly, professional even in desperation. 3 more Shermans damaged. The American advance slows. Then the American tank destroyers engage. M10s and M36s with high-velocity guns designed for this exact mission. They're positioned in overwatch, covering the Sherman advance. When the Panthers reveal their positions by firing, the destroyers respond with precision fire. One Panther takes a penetrating hit. Another is immobilized. Bauer orders withdrawal. It's not surrender, it's tactical reality. His 4 remaining operational tanks can't stop 50 Shermans supported by tank destroyers, artillery, and infantry. They can delay, trade casualties, inflict losses, but they cannot hold. The Panthers pull back 3 kilometers to the next prepared position. They'll repeat the process there, and again at the position after that. Each engagement costs the Americans several tanks. Each engagement reduces Bauer's force by 1 or 2 vehicles. The mathematics are grinding but inevitable. Over 3 days of fighting withdrawal, Bauer's company is reduced to 2 operational tanks. The Americans have lost 30 vehicles, but they're still attacking with full-strength companies because replacements arrive faster than losses accumulate. A tank commander named Kowalski experiences the same battle from the opposite perspective. His Sherman was hit on the first day. The crew bailed out safely. By evening, he was assigned to a replacement tank fresh from the supply depot. The next day, his platoon was back at full strength, despite losing 3 tanks the previous day. This is the reality that German engineers never calculated when they mocked American production methods. The Sherman isn't trying to match the Panther tank for tank. It's trying to overwhelm German armor through sheer availability, and it's succeeding. By February, the strategic situation is irreversible. American armored divisions maintain offensive momentum because destroyed tanks are replaced within days. German Panzer divisions dissolve into fragments because every loss is permanent. A logistics officer in Supreme Headquarters calculates the numbers for General Eisenhower. American tank losses in January, 412 vehicles. American tank deliveries in January, 1,247 vehicles. Net gain, 835 tanks. German tank losses in January, 327 vehicles. German tank production in January, 385 vehicles. Net gain, 58 tanks. And most of those never reach the front because of transportation difficulties and fuel shortages. The Americans are winning the war of attrition by making attrition irrelevant. They're replacing losses faster than the Germans can inflict them. Every battle trades German irreplaceable assets for American renewable resources. In Detroit, the factories continue their 24-hour schedules. Another Sherman rolls off the line every 60 minutes. The workers don't know about Bauer's desperate defense or Kowalski's replacement tank. They just know the production quotas and meet them day after day, month after month. That industrial process, multiplied across dozens of factories, sustained across years of war, creates the numerical avalanche that buries German armor doctrine. The Germans are fighting with precision instruments. The Americans are fighting with industrial output. Major Bauer surrenders in March when his last operational Panther runs out of fuel and cannot be recovered. He's captured along with his crew, joining thousands of other Panzer soldiers whose technical superiority meant nothing against material abundance. Kowalski fights through to the Rhine River, then across into Germany, then all the way to the Elbe. His Sherman gets hit twice more. Both times the crew survives. Both times he gets a replacement tank within days. The individual vehicle doesn't matter. The system matters. The final statistics tell the story that specifications never could. American armored forces maintained offensive operations for 11 consecutive months, from D-Day to VE Day. No pause for rebuilding. No operational pause for reconstitution. Continuous pressure sustained by continuous supply. German panzer forces conducted their last effective offensive in December 1944. After that, only defensive fragments, isolated counterattacks, increasingly futile resistance against an opponent who could replace every loss and still advance. The Germans built the better tank. The Americans built the better production system, the better logistics network, the better replacement pipeline, and the better strategic approach. In modern mechanized warfare, those factors mattered more. The numerical avalanche wasn't a failure of American design. It was the deliberate strategy of democratic industrial warfare. Build enough, supply enough, replace enough. Win through abundance rather than excellence. And it worked. The final vindication of American doctrine comes not from battlefield superiority, but from strategic endurance that renders German technical advantages operationally meaningless. March 1945. The war is entering its final phase, and the contrast between American and German armored forces has become absolute. Major Thomas Fletcher, now commanding a battalion after 2 promotions in 7 months, studies the map of Germany and sees the end approaching. His battalion operates at 85% strength. 3 companies of Shermans, each with 14 to 16 operational tanks. Support elements are intact. Supply lines are solid. Morale is high. The men are tired. They've been in continuous combat since Normandy, but the unit remains combat effective. Across the Rhine, German resistance is fragmenting. Intelligence reports describe panzer units that exist only on paper. Divisions reduced to company strength, companies reduced to platoon strength. Individual Panthers fighting as isolated strongpoints because there's no fuel to coordinate movement or ammunition to sustain operations. Fletcher's intelligence officer presents the assessment. Enemy armor in our sector consists of approximately 40 tanks across all types. Operational readiness estimated at 30%. Limited mobility due to fuel shortages. Minimal artillery support. No air cover. They're not conducting defensive operations, they're conducting delay actions until they run out of everything. The briefing includes captured German documents. A Panther Company commander's diary describes the situation with desperate clarity. We have 8 tanks on paper. 3 are operational. We have fuel for 2 days of limited movement. Ammunition for perhaps 10 engagements, no prospect of resupply, no hope of reinforcement. We fight until we cannot. Then we surrender. This is the culmination of strategic differences that began with design philosophy and expanded into operational doctrine. The Germans optimized for tactical excellence. The Americans optimized for strategic endurance. In the final accounting, endurance matters more. Fletcher's battalion advances across Germany against resistance that's professional but futile. They encounter Panthers periodically. The German crews fight skillfully, using terrain and positioning to maximum advantage. They inflict casualties, they cause delays, but they cannot stop the advance because they cannot sustain operations. One engagement illustrates the pattern. A Panther platoon, 2 tanks, all that remains of a full company, occupies a village crossroads. They're well positioned. The crews are experienced. Fletcher's lead company takes casualties approaching the position, but Fletcher has options the German commander doesn't. He can call artillery to suppress the position. He can request air support to attack from above. He can bring up tank destroyers to engage at long range. He can bypass the position entirely and let following units deal with it. He can afford to take his time because his supply lines are secure and his strategic timeline is permissive. The German commander has one option: fight from current position until destroyed or until forced to withdraw by encirclement. No artillery support available, no air cover, no reinforcement, no resupply. Victory is impossible. The only variables are how many casualties to inflict before the inevitable. Fletcher chooses the methodical approach. Artillery hammers the village for 30 minutes. The German crews endure the barrage buttoned up in their tanks. When the artillery lifts, American infantry works through the buildings. The Panthers are blind without infantry support, and the German infantry company that was supposed to protect them doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed or dispersed 3 weeks ago. One Panther attempts to withdraw. It runs out of fuel 2 kilometers from the village. The crew sets demolition charges and walks away. The other Panther fights until an M36 tank destroyer gets a clear shot from 600 meters. The penetrating hit kills the gunner. The surviving crew surrenders. Fletcher's company loses 2 tanks in the engagement. Both crews survive. Both tanks are recovered. One will be repaired and returned to service. The other will be stripped for parts. The company receives 2 replacement tanks the next day and returns to full operational strength. This pattern repeats across the entire Western Front. German armor fights with skill and courage, but cannot achieve strategic effect because individual tactical victories cannot overcome systemic operational inadequacy. In a logistics depot 20 miles behind the front lines, American maintenance crews work on a steady flow of damaged Shermans. Some need minor repairs, replaced track sections, serviced transmissions, new road wheels. Some need major rebuilding, new turrets, new engines, complete overhaul. All of them will return to combat because the supply of parts is unlimited and the expertise to repair them is standardized. In contrast, behind German lines, disabled Panthers are abandoned where they stop. No fuel to recover them, no parts to repair them, no transportation to move them. They become landmarks on the retreat route, monuments to technical excellence overcome by logistical collapse. The final statistics are compiled after VE Day. American armored forces destroyed or captured approximately 9,800 German tanks and assault guns during the Western European campaign. American losses totaled approximately 4,200 tanks of all types. The Germans maintained a positive kill ratio through most of the war. Their armor was genuinely superior in individual engagements. But the Americans built 49,234 Sherman tanks during the war. The Germans built 6,000 Panthers. The strategic equation was never about quality versus quality. It was about sustainable quality versus unsustainable excellence. A German panzer officer captured in April explains it during interrogation. "We knew your Shermans were inferior. Every engagement proved it. We killed 3 of yours for every one of ours you destroyed. But you had 9 more behind those 3, and when we destroyed those 9, you had 27 more, and behind those 27 you had 100. We were drowning in American tanks." Magnificent drowning, but drowning nonetheless. The interrogator doesn't argue with the assessment. He files the report and moves on to the next interview. The war is over. The debate about tank quality is academic now. In Detroit, the production lines are already shutting down. The last Sherman rolls off the Fisher Arsenal assembly line in May 1945. It's painted, tested, and placed in storage. The war ended before it could be shipped overseas. That tank, like thousands of others, will never see combat. But its existence, the fact that it could be built, shipped, and deployed if needed, is itself a form of victory. Fletcher musters his battalion in Germany for the final time before units are reassigned for occupation duty or shipment to the Pacific. He looks at the tanks lined up for inspection. They're battered, dented, scarred. Many have replacement parts from multiple vehicles. Some have field modifications. All of them are still running. In a different army, these would be considered worn out, unfit for parade. But in the American Army, they represent something more important than appearance. They represent endurance, reliability, the ability to fight today and tomorrow and every day after until the job is complete. The Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II. It was the right tank, the tank that could be built in quantity, shipped in volume, maintained in the field, and replaced when lost. It was the tank that could win not by excellence, but by availability. The German engineers who mocked it never understood that distinction. They built the Panther to win battles. The Americans built the Sherman to win wars. And when the final accounting was complete, when the last shot was fired and the last position surrendered, the Sherman was still rolling forward while the Panthers sat silent and empty along the retreat routes of a defeated nation. That was the answer to German mockery. Not technical superiority, not battlefield dominance, just the simple, devastating reality of a tank that kept fighting when more sophisticated machines could not. The Sherman rolled over the Panther line because it never stopped rolling. And in the end, that's all that mattered. After the smoke cleared and historians began analyzing World War II's armored warfare, the statistical evidence revealed a truth more complex than battlefield mythology suggested. The Sherman tank entered service with specifications that looked modest compared to its German adversaries. The 75 mm gun could penetrate 68 mm of armor at 500 meters. The frontal armor measured 51 mm at optimal angles. Top speed reached 30 miles per hour on roads. Combat weight sat at 30 tons. On paper, every metric favored the German Panther. But war isn't fought on paper. Final production numbers tell the first part of the story. American factories built 49,234 Sherman tanks between 1942 and 1945. German industry produced 6,000 Panthers in the same period. That's an 8-to-1 production advantage before considering operational readiness rates. Average operational readiness tells the second part. American Sherman units maintained 85–90% of authorized strength throughout the European campaign. German Panther units averaged 40–50% operational readiness, with some periods dropping below 35%. When only 1/3 of your technically superior tanks are actually running, the advantage evaporates. Mechanical reliability statistics are equally revealing. Shermans achieved mean miles between critical failure rates of 225 kilometers. Panthers averaged 150 kilometers before requiring depot-level maintenance. In practical terms, the Sherman could advance 50% farther than the Panther before breaking down. The mobility advantage extended beyond raw reliability. Sherman operational mobility, the ability to move when ordered, exceeded 95%. Panther operational mobility dropped to 60% due to fuel shortages, spare parts limitations, and mechanical complexity. Having the better tank doesn't matter if it can't move. Crew survivability proved decisive in sustaining combat power. Sherman crews had a 70–80% survival rate when their tank was penetrated. Panther crews achieved 50–60% survival rates. The Sherman's escape hatches were faster to use. The ammunition was better protected. The engine was less prone to catastrophic fire. Over the course of the campaign, this meant experienced American crews survived to fight in replacement tanks, while German crews were lost permanently. Training time revealed another systematic advantage. American tank crews received 16–20 weeks of comprehensive training before deployment. German crews, by 1944, were receiving 8–12 weeks of condensed training due to manpower and fuel shortages. Better training on an adequate platform beats limited training on a superior platform. The logistics statistics are staggering. American forces shipped 47,000 tanks across the Atlantic during the war. German forces produced their armor in-country but couldn't sustain field operations due to disrupted supply chains. By late 1944, German panzer divisions received 30% of their required spare parts allocation. American armored divisions received 95–100% of requirements. Combat loss replacement times demonstrate the strategic impact of industrial capacity. Average American tank replacement time, 5 to 7 days from loss to replacement vehicle at unit level. Average German tank replacement time, 21–30 days when replacement was possible at all. This meant American units could sustain offensive operations, while German units degraded toward combat ineffectiveness. The combined arms effectiveness multiplier cannot be captured in tank versus tank statistics alone. American doctrine integrated tanks with artillery, infantry, air support, and tank destroyers. German doctrine concentrated capability in the tank itself. When American forces engaged German armor, they brought 3-ton-5 supporting systems. German armor often fought without adequate support due to resource constraints and tactical isolation. Total cost per tank provides perspective on design philosophy. One Sherman cost $44,556 in 1945 dollars. One Panther cost approximately $117,000 equivalent. The Americans could build 2.6 Shermans for every Panther. And they did, creating the numerical advantage that proved decisive. Personnel casualty statistics show the human cost of technical decisions. American tank crews suffered approximately 6,700 combat deaths in Europe. German Panzer crews lost over 18,000 men. Higher survival rates, better training, and faster replacement cycles meant American losses were more sustainable. Strategic mobility tells the final story. American armored divisions advanced an average of 47 kilometers per week during offensive operations from D-Day to VE Day. German panzer divisions averaged 12 kilometers per week during offensive operations and spent most of 1944-1945 conducting defensive withdrawals. The slower, more methodical American advance was continuous. The technically superior German capability was episodic. Post-war analysis by captured German officers consistently emphasized the same factors. General von Mellenthin wrote, "The American Sherman was inferior to our Panthers in nearly every technical particular, yet they won the armored war through superior numbers, better logistics, and unbreakable supply chains." Another captured panzer officer stated during interrogation, "We could destroy 3 American tanks for every one we lost, but we could not replace our 1 lost tank, and the Americans replaced their 3 and added 5 more. We were winning every battle and losing the campaign." The Sherman's true achievement wasn't battlefield superiority, it was operational endurance. The tank that could be produced in massive numbers, shipped across oceans, maintained by minimally trained mechanics, supplied with standardized parts, and replaced rapidly when lost, proved more valuable than the technically superior weapon that couldn't be sustained in the field. By VE Day in May 1945, American armored forces fielded over 12,000 tanks in Europe. German armored forces could muster fewer than 1,500 tanks across all types. The final ratio wasn't determined by specifications, it was determined by systems. The Sherman's legacy extended beyond World War II. The basic design served in Korea. Modified versions fought in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. The final combat deployment came in the 1990s during the Bosnian conflict. No Panther saw combat after 1945 because none remained operational. The statistical vindication is complete. The German engineers who mocked the Sherman's modest specifications were analyzing the wrong metrics. They measured performance in ideal conditions. The Americans designed for performance in realistic conditions: mud, mechanical stress, inadequate maintenance, imperfect supply, and continuous operation. The Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II by any single technical metric. It was the best weapon system because it integrated design, production, logistics, training, doctrine, and replacement into a complete framework for sustained mechanized warfare. When German engineers looked at the Sherman's specifications and laughed, they were making the same mistake commanders have made throughout military history, confusing tactical excellence with strategic effectiveness. The Sherman proved that strategic effectiveness matters more. The numbers don't lie. 49,234 tanks built, 85–90% operational readiness maintained, 225 kilometers mean distance between failures, 5 to 7 day replacement cycle, 70–80% crew survival rate, 47 kilometers per week sustained advance. Those aren't the statistics of an inferior weapon. Those are the statistics of victory. The German Panther was a magnificent achievement of military engineering. The American Sherman was a magnificent achievement of military systems thinking. In World War II, systems thinking defeated engineering excellence because wars are won by sustained capability, not peak performance. The Sherman rolled over the Panther line because it kept rolling when the Panthers stopped. That's the final answer to German mockery. Not better specifications, not superior armor or gun performance, just the relentless, undeniable statistical reality of a weapon system that worked day after day, battle after battle, mile after mile, until victory was complete. The Germans built a better tank. The Americans built a better way to win. And the history books record which approach succeeded. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this deep dive into how American industrial might and tactical doctrine overcame German technical superiority. The Sherman tank's story reminds us that engineering excellence means nothing without the logistics, training, and doctrine to sustain it in combat. These crews didn't just fight. They endured, adapted, and ultimately prevailed through the systematic application of American industrial democracy against authoritarian technical sophistication. The Sherman versus Panther debate continues to fascinate military historians 8 decades later. But the verdict was rendered in 1945 when American armored divisions stood victorious in Berlin, while German panzer forces had dissolved into scattered fragments. The men who crewed those inferior Shermans knew what modern analysts sometimes forget. Wars aren't won by the best weapons. They're won by the best systems, sustaining adequate weapons in sufficient numbers until the job is complete. From the factories of Detroit to the fields of France to the final battles in Germany, the Sherman tank proved that sometimes the unglamorous choice, the reliable, maintainable, producible option, defeats the spectacular innovation that can't be sustained. It's a lesson that echoes through military procurement debates to this day. What's your take on the Sherman versus Panther debate? Do you think technical superiority or operational sustainability matters more in modern warfare? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.